Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, people of all races, colors, and creeds, welcome to the greatest show on earth. Yes, and I don't say that without backing it up. Who else talks about the Vatican-led New World Order in these terms? And today, you're going to get a special dose of it. But anyway, you're listening to the long-running show, The Investigative Journal. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, here again to tell you the most important story in the world that's never told. The Vatican-led Jesuit New World Order. And today we're going to do kind of like a classroom session, because a lot of times I'm talking over the heads of people who just tune in and have no idea about what we're talking about. And that's no fault of their own, because this has been an orchestrated effort for hundreds of years to keep the truth from the people of the world. Not just the American people, but the people of the world. And we're going to get into just some basic stuff, just maybe to get those people up to speed. But first, let's talk about this impeachment debate going on. Well, it's not really even a debate. It is an orchestrated effort that both parties at the top levels have agreed upon. Now, you might not hear that anywhere, but when you understand that both the Democrats and the Republicans at the high levels work together, and basically what they do is they use a term called the Hegelian Dialectic to confuse you. And what that means is they take two diametrically opposed positions, such as socialism now on the Democratic Party, and capitalism and America First on the Trumpian side. And they rub those two together right now, causing chaos. And isn't that exactly what's going on? We have half the country who hates Donald Trump and his followers, and we have half the country that really despises Clinton, the globalists, the Democrat Socialist movement, and their party. But at the top levels, they all work together, and they want this to come to a head, and they rub these two groups together, and in the end, they're going to get their synthesis. And what will that be? It will not be America First. It will not be just a pure socialist movement. It will be the Vatican Jesuit-led New World Order, one world order, one world religion. And in the end, it's going to create it all over the world. And you say, Greg, you're crazy. That's really what's going on with the impeachment. Now, let's look at this from a practical point of view. Have you ever seen anything crazier than the Democrats right now? We'll get to socialism in a minute. But have you ever seen anything crazier? All you got to do is listen to a few minutes of this impeachment going on in Washington, and you're going to go, well, how could that be? First of all, it is a partisan effort that's never, ever happened in our country. Impeachment is always, the only way it works is with a bipartisan group working together where the president has done something so terrible, like high crimes and misdemeanors, that he can no longer serve. But this is not anything like that. Now, let's look at it from this point of view. What have they done with Trump from the beginning? What has Trump, basically, he's in there, he was put there. They told you 10, 15 years ago he was going to be president. He was put there to play this role. And the role he's playing is he's gathering up the forces of American middle class, true American patriots that love this country. And what's happening? You're seeing that they've been called every name in the book by the left-wing press, CNN and all of their MSNBC and the others, they have been called, deplorables by Hillary Clinton. They've been called smelly Walmart shoppers. And this is America. This is the backbone of America. So what's happened is they've been called every name in the book. Trump has been called every name in the book. And they have called for his impeachment. Now, when would a newspaper 50 years ago? I mean, it's never been quite a free press in America, but it's not quite as bad as it is today. When would a newspaper 50 years ago call for the impeachment of a president 19 minutes after he took office? Now, this whole idea, if you've been living under a rock, you haven't heard of the Mueller report and what they tried to do with the Trump movement and get rid of him when he first took office by saying that he colluded with Russia to win the election and take it away from the Queen, Hillary Clinton. And so this went on for 2.5 years. $40 million was spent in this investigation. And in the end, just recently, there was no evidence. Even though you have people in Congress saying they had solid evidence that Trump worked with Russia to fix the election. Never happened. So what happens? The left wing never accepted it. Even the newspapers, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, didn't really print the truth about it. They still were going on and on and on to impeach this guy for what? Now, in a republic like ours, if this was really going on the level, if it wasn't orchestrated by a higher power above the leaders of both parties, this would never happen. Never in a million years. Because they would be, okay, you don't like your political opponent, but he was voted in, and basically you do the best you can and try to vote him out the next 4 years, in 4 years. And in the meantime, you try to do something on a bipartisan level to help the American people. That's not going on at all. Nothing is going on in Washington except this. So basically, the globalists on the side of Clinton and Obama and the rest of them decided, well, we're not going to let it go. So what happens? Trump gets on a telephone call with a president. This is what we're going to talk about today for a minute before I get into my 101 class on Jesuit-led New World Order. But anyway, Trump, they say that he had a phone call with the new Ukrainian president, and that there was a this for that, a quid pro quo, where he said, I'm not going to give you the money for your defense, the defense spending money, unless you investigate Hunter and Joe Biden for what they did with the last political movement in Ukraine, the last political leaders in Ukraine who were ousted for their corruption. But he never said that. He never said this for that. It's obvious, and he provided the transcript of the phone call, and there was no this for that. And then what happens? The Democrats, for 2 weeks now, have been putting on witnesses in Congress that were basically all hearsay witnesses. There was no factual evidence that he did anything. And how many conversations do presidents have that have been far worse than what Trump did? And did you ever hear a conversation be brought out about Obama, of the Clintons? If we ever heard the conversations that the Clintons had with the Russians and the Obama had with them, in the same environment, they would have been ousted a long time ago. It is definitely an orchestrated effort, because I've never seen anything like this. This is like a third world movement to get rid of a president without any evidence. It's what goes on in banana republics. But it's going on here in America. And it's designed for one thing, to show the American people they have no rights anymore, that what they're doing is hopeless because of the way they're being treated, one, by the Justice Department, who seems to always put people in Trump's camp in jail, and forgets about anything that the Clintons, the Bidens, and anybody on that side, all of these guys who in the beginning in the FBI put this huge hoax together to go to the FISA court to get information on Trump people without it being verified. It was a lie, and they did it anyway. Now, why haven't any of these people been, brought down? The reason is they're trying to show the American people that, look, there is a two-tier justice system here. So you're either going to be on the side of the globalists or forget it. That's what's going on in the long run. Now, let's just look at this phone call that Trump made. Now, Obama and Ukraine never gave the Ukrainians any money for their defense. And guess what happens? Russia comes in and takes Crimea. Now, why isn't that brought up? Because Trump, in a sense, gave money, gave some very sophisticated missiles to Ukraine to protect it against Russia, and treated Russia much tougher than Obama ever did. He didn't give away $150 billion to Iran in cash that they flew over in an airplane like a drug dealer. Now, whatever happened to that? Nothing. That's okay, because you're on the side of the globalists. And you know what? All of these Republicans in the Senate at the top are in on it as well, because they're not doing anything. They're allowing the House to run roughshod over the American people while the Senate sits back and does absolutely nothing. It shows to me that this is an orchestrated effort. Now, just this phone call. Trump said, hey, do what you want, but the issue of Hunter Biden, which is Biden's son, and Joe Biden came up. Okay. Now, here's what happened. Joe Biden, a former vice president under Obama, he was point man for both Ukraine and China. And let's just talk about the Ukraine. So at the time, his son was put on a board of a company called Burisma, a crooked energy company in the Ukraine. He received something like $60,000 a month, and roughly they say $16.5 million or more through this company. Now, Hunter Biden had no experience in energy whatsoever. All he was the son of the vice president. Now, when you look back at what happened, this company was being investigated by a prosecutor in the former administration in Ukraine because it's been linked to money laundering and bilking the people of the Ukraine out of millions of dollars. And so this company was being investigated by a prosecutor there. Now, when Joe Biden, the vice president, got word of this, he called and said, listen, if you don't get to the president of the Ukraine, if you don't get rid of this prosecutor, because his son was on the board of Burisma, right? If you don't get rid of this prosecutor, you're not going to get all these millions of dollars in aid from the United States, and you have 6 hours. Then he's on tape, and you've seen it on the news if you listen, stating, son of a bitch, they fired the prosecutor. Well, how come? Now, that's not investigated at all. But it is right now. But not here. Here it's being hushed up, and the Washington Post, the New York Times, and all of the media, the mainstream media, except for, of course, Fox News, is saying, oh, he did nothing wrong. But listen to what the Ukrainians are doing. The head of Burisma Holdings, now this is the company that Hunter Biden was on, the son of the vice president, through his connections only through Joe, vice president. He served on the board and has been indicted. The head of the Burisma Holdings now has been indicted by Ukraine's Office of the Prosecutor General for money laundering and corruption, according to Ukrainian Alexander Dubinsky. Now, during a Wednesday press conference last week, Dubinsky claimed that an investigation into Nikolai Sayachevsky and Burisma found a link that, and this is quote, a link that reveals how money is siphoned from Ukraine, notably through Hunter Biden, who received $16.5 million, quote, through criminal means and money laundering. The son of the vice president, Joe Biden, was receiving payment for his services with money raised through criminal means and money laundering, Dubinsky said. Biden received money that did not come from the company's successful operation, but rather from money stolen from citizens of the Ukraine. Now that's going on in Ukraine. Now, if you were an American president and you had a guy now running for president, which is Joe Biden on the Democratic side, or you had a press that was fair, you'd want to know, hey, is this guy crooked? He's running for president, and this is going on in the last time when he was vice president? But of course not. They're there trying to impeach Trump for doing basically nothing. That, to me, allowing this to go on, the Senate of the United States, which is in Republican hands, allowing this to go on with not calling in their Foreign Relations Committee, in their Justice Committee, not calling in these people for investigation shows me that they're working together. The Hegelian dialectic at work. All right, so you got my take on why this is going on, and in the long run, where is it going to lead to? Right where I said, socialism. Most people think right now that if you're a millennial, there's a book out now, and I can't think of the name, I'll get it for you tomorrow, talking about real polls done with millennials, and 70% of them apparently are in love with socialism. Now, how can anybody be in love with socialism except if you're a Jesuit who created socialism back in the 1600s with the Paraguay experiments? So if you're a millennial out there, do some history about these people who really basically created socialism, moved it into Russia as communism, and then created socialism in places like Cuba, and just to be a little bit more up to date, Venezuela. Now, if you haven't been following anything in Venezuela, then how could you, that's the only way that you could say you would like to see socialism in America, like the New Democratic Party. I mean, if you realize that they can't even buy bread there, bread and milk cost like $10,000. I mean, you got inflation at 10,000%. You got half the country leaving, 5 million people scurrying out of Venezuela, and socialism works? Well, if America wasn't really behind, or there wasn't a plot in this country that we don't understand, if it wasn't being controlled, why haven't we gotten rid of Maduro, the leader of the socialist movement in Venezuela? It'd be very easy, because they wanted to stay, they wanted to be there to show you exactly what's going to happen to you here. Even though most Americans believe that want socialism, that it will be an American form of socialism. No, that's their talking point. So anyway, if you follow a little farther, you'll see that in Bolivia, remember, they just ousted the president there, who was a socialist and really was friends with El Chapo, right? He now is in Mexico. And you know, the Mexican president is a socialist, and he's given this guy a position in his cabinet. Now, how can you do that if he's not even Mexican? I don't know. But anyway, so follow the bouncing socialism ball. It's going on all over the place. For what? Because they want to change America as we see it. That's why just recently, in the last, 6 months, you've seen the Democratic Party move into this socialist category. I mean, everyone, most everyone, except for maybe one or two of the 15 or 20 Democratic candidates for president, are following a socialist and holding up a socialist banner. Then you hear the few new congresswomen that came in. You know who I'm talking about. Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and a few others, all pushing socialism. You didn't hear this before. And you know what? The Democratic Party is moving in that direction. Why? Because they have to change America. It's not going to be the way it is. I will predict if we come back here 50 years from now, it won't even be a country that you recognize. And you're seeing the beginning of it now. And to listen to these debates, it's incredible that this is happening. Now look, every country has problems. But to really believe that socialism is the answer, you got to be crazy. You really do. Now I'll give you an idea here why. Look at who started it. Now most people have no idea who the Jesuits are, so what I say sometimes has no meaning to a lot of people. But they're a power behind the force, behind what's movement, the force that you see, the political movements. And through their cunning and through their deception, they've been used by many, many countries, and many leaders of countries have been blackmailed by them. And together with the Vatican, the richest organization in the world, political leaders follow their footsteps. So remember, the Jesuits created this idea of socialism back in the 1600s in the Paraguay experiments. That's all you have to do. Look that up, start reading about it, and then start understanding what I say here. That the Vatican-led New World Order is basically behind the scenes of a lot of what's going on in this orchestrated effort in Congress right now to oust Trump, who's in on it as well, and really to push a socialist agenda. And I'll add with this, look up your hero if you're a socialist, Ocasio-Cortez, what she was doing prior to being a congresswoman. In her district, there was an audition like she was an actress, and this is a true story. And they had an open call for the seat of Congress by a movement called the Justice Democrats. And so her brother, she was a bartender, had no political aspirations whatsoever, or maybe she did deep down inside, but no experience. So she went to this audition like an actress, as if you were in Hollywood, for the part of Congresswoman in Brooklyn on a socialist agenda. And because of her, I guess, everything put together about her, she was the perfect actress to play the part. Now, once she won the primary with the help of these people behind the scenes, she was given everything to say, and still to this day is being given everything. This will tell you what's going on, and this is not only going to happen in Brooklyn, it's now being orchestrated all across the country. So look out for these people. Start looking at where these people came from. And I bet you if we go deep enough, you'd find a Jesuit connection. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today. so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal, and watch out for that supreme Jesuit command. They don't want you listening to what we're talking about here, because we might get to the truth about who the Jesuit order and the Vatican really are. But anyway, I promised I was going to give you a 101 class today on some of the words we use when we talk about the Vatican-led New World Order. And I thought we'd start out right away with the Black Pope. Now, I'm sure you've heard that, of the Black Pope. What is it? Well, this is really an Italian nickname for the Jesuit Superior General, the man who is the commander-in-chief of the Society of Jesus. He's the real power behind the throne of the papacy, and he's also the master of all these other things. The Knights of Malta, the highest levels of the Knights of Columbus, the highest levels of Opus Dei, and the highest levels of Freemasonry, and all of the subgroups that he controls through these powerful and influential organizations. The Black Pope. Now, when I was in Rome, I first heard the Black Pope, and I asked somebody there. I didn't know much about what we're talking about today, and one of the priests there told me, well, that's because he wears black. I said, well, everybody wears black in your order, right? He said, yeah. Okay, well, what's the Illuminati? Now, this is a word you'll hear all over the place, right? Well, what really is it? Well, what's the modern version of the Illuminati, whom some folks falsely believe it to be a Jewish-led group? Now, once I say that, people are going to say, well, Greg, you're half Jewish and you're just covering for them. Well, that's not true. But anyway, even if I say that, there are going to be people who won't believe it. So anyway, this is this Illuminati was supposedly formed on May 1, 1776, that great date, by Jesuit Adam Weishaupt, who had previously taught where? Roman Catholic Canon Law, Jesuit Ingolstadt College in Bavaria, that's in southern Germany. And this Jesuit Adam Weishaupt pretended to leave the Jesuit order so that he could set up a Jesuit front group called the Illuminati. Now, it's not uncommon that Jesuits actually leave the order and take positions in our society where they actually criticize their own group. Yep, That's why you got to watch out, because you never know who's telling the truth, do you? Now, he pretended to leave the order so that he could set up this front group. Now, this front group, the Illuminati, planned, fomented, and orchestrated the bloody French Revolution in 1789 to 1799. And by using this Illuminati front group, the Jesuit order was given a great degree of plausible deniability about the role that it had played in the French Revolution. Now, we on this show talk about how they fomented the American Revolution, and they've basically used the same plausible deniability if anybody starts talking about it. You won't see this in the history books, and that brings up a thing about the separation of church and state. Because to me, you have to bring up the understanding of the Vatican, the Protestant Reformation, and it's impossible to understand European history, American history, and church history over the past 5 centuries without a good understanding of the Protestant Reformation and the Jesuit-led Counter-Reformation. But there's really not that much ever talked about when you try to mix it up with politics, right? So you have, in history, the separation of church and state. But in the real world, like in America, where there's supposed to be a separation of church and state in running our government, you see just the opposite. And that's obvious when you see all the money that's doled out to the Vatican and all the favors they get. So it just doesn't seem to make sense. But this Jesuit order, for those of you who don't know, was founded in 1534 by Ignatius of Loyola and was officially approved as a religious order of the Roman Catholic Church by Pope Paul III in 1540. Now, the primary goals of this order are 1, to roll back the Protestant Reformation and the freedoms that it brought to many of the inhabitants of the world, and 2, to enhance the power and prestige of the papacy and its white pope. And isn't it interesting today the Jesuits are both the white and black pope? Okay, they got both the Vatican and the Jesuit order sewed up, so to speak. And 3, to rule despotically over the governments of the world through the papacy. And you know, that's the most difficult thing to get across people. I tried to explain it in the first half hour, how it's done by saying there's this power above the power, controlling both the Democrats and the Republicans. Well, that's what we discuss here on this show a lot, the Hegelian dialectic and how it's used. Then we talked about socialism. Where did socialism come from? You never hear about it, but it came from the Jesuits and the Paraguay experiments in the 1600s. There's a connection, folks. But then you hear the word Jesuit temporal coadjutor. Somebody who does what? Well, the first I heard about it was from Eric Phelps, who wrote a book called Vatican Assassins. And the quote that in his book was, a Jesuit temporal coadjutor is someone who performs service or duties for the Jesuit order, but who is not a Jesuit priest. This person may be of any race, religion, or sex. Okay, important work, as you hear it a lot. There are a lot of Jesuits out there who don't wear the collar. And secondly, there's a lot who actually are Jesuits, but actually talk against their own system, the Hegelian dialectic. Talk against the Jesuits even though they're Jesuits. Now, you probably have heard of the Knights of Columbus. You know, and you think about, oh, they run these auctions and they have these carnivals. I used to go to them all the time in Chicago. And you'd see the Knights of Columbus. Now, who are the Knights of Columbus? In Jeremiah J. Crowley's book, author of Romanism, A Menace in the Nation, printed in 1912, the Knights of Columbus were founded in New Haven, Connecticut on February 2nd, 1882, by Reverend M.J. McGivney, curate of St. Mary's Church, an adroit feature of this organization, to which Roman Catholics are only eligible, is the initiative service of 4 degrees. They work in collusion with the hierarchy and are the heart and soul in politics. The fact is well known to political machines and non-Catholic politicians, whose candidates must receive their approval, Rome and the Knights of Columbus, before they dare nominate them for either dog pound or presidency. The Knights of Columbus' principal business is politics, Jesuitical politics. Yes, sir. Now, what about, you've heard this all the time, the Knights of Malta. A lot of knights out there. It's a Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta is a Roman Catholic religious military order headquartered in Rome with and under the command of the Jesuit Superior General. Much of the wealth of the Knights Templar order, when it was suppressed in 1312, was given to the Knights of Malta. Many Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta have held top-level positions in various governments. Franz von Papen in Nazi Germany, and the world's foremost intelligence agencies, William Donovan, the American, General Reinhard Gehlen, a German, Prince Anton Turkel during World War II. In international banking and in the publishing world, they're all over. A number of Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta continue to hold such positions. According to author and researchers, the following heads of the Central Intelligence Agency have all been Knights of Malta. William Donovan, head of the first OSS, predecessor to the CIA. Alan Dulles, who was also a high-level Freemason. John McCone, William Casey, William Colby, George Tenet, Leon Panetta, to name a few. Now, you've probably heard of this term somewhere, or maybe you haven't. The Knights of the Golden Circle. I've basically need to refresh my memory on this one. The Knights of the Golden Circle, it's a secret society controlled by the Jesuit order. And it's helped along with the Jesuit-controlled high-level Freemasons on both sides of the conflict to foment the bloody American Civil War of 1861 to 1865 that took the lives of over 620,000 American soldiers. Combined total dead from wounds and disease from both sides, and possibly up to 50,000 civilians. John Wilkes Booth, the man who was in the conspiracy to shoot Lincoln, was a member of the Knights of the Golden Circle. Okay. He wasn't the lone gunman. There were many more, and we've talked about the Jesuit involvement in the assassination of Lincoln. Now, we got to get to this term. You hear it all the time. NWO, New World Order. There's a New World Order. But what is it? It's basically, I like to say it's really an old world order. It's been around a long time. And it's used now as a New World Order. It's basically a blueprint for the ruling world via a one-world economy, one-world government, and one-world religion. The real master of this New World Order, who may continue to operate from behind the scenes, is the Black Pope, the Jesuits. Since he controls his powerful Jesuit order, the wealthy Knights of Malta, top levels of Freemasonry, and the papacy itself, he's clearly the most powerful man in the world today. The one world religion will most likely be headed by the Roman Pontiff through the Black Pope, and will continue to be the real power behind the scenes, and has been for centuries, folks. When the game plan for the New World Order is fully implemented, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, as well as the rights to keep and bear arms, will all be relics of the past. And you can see that push today, can't you? No dissent will be tolerated, and dissenters will be terminated with extreme prejudice. One of the first acts of the New World Order will be to launch another modern-day Inquisition. People say it's impossible? I don't think so. Now, what is Papal Rome? We talk about it a lot. And there's a simple explanation. It's the government of the Roman Catholic Church state, whose headquarters presently are in Rome, Italy. So let me give you an introduction about the Jesuits, the Order of Jesus, the Sons of Loyola, and the company they're called. Like I said, it was founded in 1534 by Loyola, was officially recognized by Pope Paul III in 1540, and they're famous as educators and father confessors to kings, queens, and many of the powerful and wealthy elite of the world today. Jesuits are also infamous as murderers of kings, makers of sedition, and fomenters of wars and revolutions. This side of them you don't hear that often, do you? Many books, though, folks, have been written about the Jesuit order, and many of these books contend that the higher levels of the Jesuit order are basically pure evil. Is the Jesuit order at its highest level the most evil organization that the world has ever known in the past 5 centuries? Why has the Jesuit order been expelled from so many countries, including many predominantly Roman Catholic countries during its history? Is the Jesuit order and the papacy that it controls responsible for fomenting many wars and revolutions such as World War I, World War II? Is the Jesuit-controlled Roman Catholic Church state the greatest threat to freedom that the world has ever seen? Has the Jesuit order been responsible for assassinating many heads of state over the centuries? Does the Jesuit order, which controls the Roman Catholic Church state, the Knights of Malta, the highest levels of the Knights of Columbus and Opus Dei, and the highest levels of Freemasonry, sit at the very top of this, what we discussed, the New World Order pyramid? Surely inquiring minds would like answers to the above questions. Now, the question I have is, why don't we ever even hear the questions asked? It's usually what's hidden that's the truth. And these, folks, are questions that need to be asked and answered. But you'll never hear it because they control the media. Now here's some quotes dealing with the history of the Jesuit order that have been forgotten in time. But here's one. On September 27, 1540, in a private reception hall of the Palace of the Popes on Vatican Hill, Rome, 11 men of aristocratic birth, including Ignatius Loyola, met with Pope Paul III, who gave approval of their order. That beginning was to become the most loyal and most efficient organization the Roman Catholic Church has ever spawned. In the agreement to rescue the Roman Catholic Church state from the predicament of losing its world control to Protestantism during the Protestant Reformation, and to preserve the spiritual and temporal supremacy which the popes usurped during the Middle Ages, Rome now sold the Church to the Society of Jesus. In essence, the popes surrendered themselves into their hands. You can get that quote from John Daniel in his book called The Grand Design Exposed, page 64, book published in 1999. Now here's one from HarperCollins Tupper-Saucy. Rulers of evil. The Roman Inquisition had been administered since 1542 by the Jesuits. Now here's one from J.E. Shepard, a Canadian historian, called The Babington Plot. This book was written in 1987. So it's not too long ago. Why don't you hear about it here? Between 1555 and 1931. That's a long time. The Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order, was expelled from at least 83 countries, city-states and cities, for engaging in political intrigue and subversive plots against the welfare of the state, according to the records of a Jesuit priest of repute, Thomas Campbell. Practically every instance of expulsion was for political intrigue, political infiltration, political subversion, and the inciting to political insurrection. So let me make a statement. I believe the Jesuits are going to be behind the downfall of this country and are pushing socialism right now. Is that true? Well, to those of you who don't believe, did they just stop doing this in 1931 out of the kindness of their heart? Here's another quote. The priest, the woman, and the confessional. This was in Chick Publications. In 1560, the Senate of Venice forbade the Jesuits to confess women, to hear confession from women, because they made use of the confession for purposes of immorality. Many boys and girls are first made to eat of the tree of the knowledge of evil in the confessional. Now that was written by A. Robertson, the Roman Catholic Church in Italy, 1903. The Roman Catholic confessional has indeed been the seed of much evil. Charles Chiniquy, a priest of 25 years in the Roman Catholic Church, exposed this debauchery of the confessional in his book, The Priest, the Woman, and the Confessional, and you can find that published at Chick Publications. Another quote by an unknown Jesuit researcher, the Jesuit general. Oh, wait a second, this is by Eric Phelps. The Jesuit general in control of the monarchs of France mass murdered the French Protestant Calvinists, including their great leader, Admiral Coligny. They starting with the St. Bartholomew's massacre in Paris, France, on August 24th, 1572. Okay. Now, let's look about this Babington plot. This was a plot, and this was written again in, whose book here? This was J.E.C. Shepard, 1987. This Babington plot was a conspiracy that was hatched in 1580. It's probably the greatest of the many plots of the Pope and the Jesuits during the reigns of Queen Elizabeth I and James I, designed to bring about the downfall of the Protestant England, the overthrow of the Reformation in England, Scotland, and Ireland, and to place some other claimant upon the throne who would be acceptable to papal Rome and committed to bring the English in submission to the sovereignty of Rome. Between 1569 and 1605, the Gunpowder Plot of infamy, and I always say when we discuss American history, start there too. I mean, it's interesting. There were no less than 11 great plots against Elizabeth and English Protestantism, working toward assassination, rebellion, and invasion. Each is known by the name of the leader of the treachery: Rodolphe, Saunders, Gregory III, Pope Gregory III, etc., and others. The Babington Plot. Well, folks, there can be no doubt whatsoever that the Pope of Rome was very much interested, as well as vitally involved in all of those attempts. The Babington Plot to assassinate Queen Elizabeth I, to incite rebellion, and then to place Roman Catholic Mary Stuart on the throne, took its name from Anthony Babington, a young English gentleman, but the real brains behind the conspiracy was the Pope, Gregory XIII, Cardinal Allen, the Jesuits, and the Roman Catholic priest named John Ballard. And this is in J.E.C. Shepard's book, written in 1987 out of Toronto, Canada, called The Babington Plot, Jesuit Intrigue in Elizabethan England. Now, do you think they just stopped doing this stuff, or this is, they were bad seeds back then, but no, now they've changed their ways? That's what you'll get from a lot of people. I just don't buy it. Let's just pick out one more. This is a lot here about England. And I wanted to end, because I only have a minute, with these thoughts. All we do on this show really is ask a lot of questions. And it's amazing to me that these questions don't get out to the mainstream. And it shows to me that there's an orchestrated effort to hide something. And when you try to hide something, you're not doing something that's good. Let's just make it real simple. And so, bringing up all these things leads one to believe that maybe we're living in a world that's being controlled, the information being controlled, the way we think, what we buy, what we eat, how much money we spend, etc., for a purpose. And who is doing this? Most people will think it's just the way of the world. It's the way the politics work. But I think there's something much more behind this that leads one to believe that we must start looking towards what we talk about here, and that is the Vatican Jesuit New World Order. What if everything I've said here is wrong? Well, okay, but let's at least get it on the table, and I would bet $1 to a donut that much of what is said here has been hidden for a reason and is the truth. Now, you can never get totally everything with a secret organization. You must use circumstantial evidence. But let me tell you, it's just too fishy in my eyes that none of this stuff ever gets out, and you're never taught this early on in high school or college. Why? You're taught by the very Jesuitical order that's causing these revolutions and wars. That's why it continues. And until we do, we're never going to really understand American history, understand European history, and really understand what's going on in the world today. It's a story that needs a lot more exposure, and hopefully people will catch on before it is too late. Well, it's late here. We're done with the investigative journal today. Back tomorrow on First Amendment Radio.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.